So I don't know what happened to her. So we're going to use this, go to the manufacturer workspace, which used to be called CAM, computer aided machining, but this also has you can do certain things with like additive. So right now there's, if you look up here, these are some different extensions you can download and use for free. So I do have this machining extension in access on. I don't know if you absolutely need it for what we're doing, but it's right here. And then we're going to use the milling. So we'll be in the milling tab. So we're kind of going to follow, we always are going to start with what's called the setup. So if you click on this folder, this setup window will pop up. So we have to tell it where our origin of our stock is going to be. So like right now, if I zoom in, this light gray or light brown is the stock. So I have to tell it where I'm going to measure on the machine. So right here, there's this box point right there. So I can click on a stock point, and then the origin that you're measuring from will go there. So on the machine in over here in the shop bot, this is the way that like if I'm looking at from the side of the machine at the machine, X is this way, Y is that way. But on the other machine, the Y is actually coming at us. So right here is where you're choosing what's called your work coordinate system. So the machine has its system where like we zero the machine. You know how like when we're doing the 3D prints, you home it? That's like zeroing it out. So it hits those things. And then we're going to tell it where our piece is going to be. So in this particular one, I can choose an orientation like by selecting the X and Y axes. So for the X axis, I'm going to choose that. And then you can also flip by clicking on the arrow like that. So we want our Z axis to be here. And I'm going to flip this Y. And then I'm going to use this box point. And it doesn't really matter exactly where you're putting the box point, except that if you put it on the top of the material and we machine that away, there's nothing to measure off of. So we usually use the bed of the machine because that's a constant that we can measure from. And a lot of times I will set this when I'm at the machine because sometimes I forget which orientation they're in. And I can actually physically move the machine to check. So As long as you have this somewhere, right, for the moment, that's fine. And then it's already pre-selected this body for me. And then I'm going to go to my stock tab right here. And right now it's set up here as relative size box. So it's just adding a little tiny bit to the outside edge, because it's assuming that you're starting with a big block of steel or whatever, and then cutting it out and then doing another refined cut to get it to a certain size. We're using foam, so we're going to add a little bit more on. So we're going to use a fixed size box instead of relative size box. And then I'm going to make this 11 inches by 9 inches. And our foam that we buy is 2 inches thick, but I've already taken off some of the surface, so I'm going to put 1.75 inches. And then here where it says model position, for the Z, I'm going to offset from the bottom 0 inches. So see how it sets that now on the bottom of the bed, so it's not like floating in the middle. So basically in this setup, you're setting the origin of where your stock is going to be, where you're going to measure from, and then setting the size of the stock. And then you can just click OK. So this is our setup. So the first thing we're going to do are some 2D milling operations. So these are all the different 2D milling operations. So there's like face and contour if you want to trace something. We don't have any threading tools or boring tools, but we'll sometimes use circular because we don't have drills. So we have to use the mill to make a circular path if you want a certain size hole. And then there's engraving as well, which would use like a pointed tip if you wanted to engrave onto the surface of something. So the first one we're going to do is a face. So you can click on face. And we have to select a tool first. So we can go to select our tool. And yours might not have these in dark letters. So if you right click and go to turn all libraries on, that will turn your tool library on. And then if you right click on the local, you can import a library. So I sent you that file that says Alfred Tools. So if you want to download that and put that in, you'll have some tools that I've already set up. Did you download that? If you don't have that, it will be okay for now. But if you put this in, then I will have some tools already set. So if you have that and you've imported it, you can go to your Alfred tools here, import it, go to your local and right click and go import libraries. We set the length of our tool at the machine. So, because like when you put it in the holder, there's no way to know how like exactly where it is in the z-axis. We know exactly how thick it is, but we don't know how long it is. So a lot of the whole down here, if you have your Fusion 360 library on, the first type of tool we're going to use is a flat end mill, because we're just going to flatten the surface. If you just click on flat end mill, it will bring up a list of flat end mills, and you can go down here to milling tools inch and choose a 1/2 inch flat end mill. And if I choose that 1/2 inch flat end mill, then it'll pop up and show it here. So you'll notice that it has this big holder here. And this is the tool. Most tools are pretty short because they're made for milling through steel and hard materials. So they deflect too much if they're long, but we're using fairly soft materials, well, very soft materials. So we have some longer bits. So just in the Alfred tools, I have a 1/2 inch end mill here. And you'll notice it's a lot longer. And the holder is more accurate to what we have. So milling tools, and just choose we want a flat end mill, and a 1/2 inch is what we have. And you can click select. Or the Alfred tools, I have a 1/2 inch that's longer. So in this dialog, it right here where it says feeds and speeds, our spindle, like on the router, is not controlled by anything except a little switch on the router. So that doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters here is this cutting feed rate. And for foam, like I have these set up for foam, so it's 150 inches a minute. And then the plunge is like when it goes down into the material. So if you don't have this Alfred tool selected, you might notice that the feed rate is like 39 inches per minute or something. It's much slower because it's assuming you're cutting into a type of material. So like under here, it'll give you different speeds. So like stainless steel's really hard. It's cutting at 7 inches a minute. So that's really slow. So aluminum is approximately around the feeds that we are going to use. It's about 130 inches a minute. we don't have coolant on our machine, so that can be disabled. And then at this point, I'll usually just click OK, because then it will save the toolpath over to here. So this is my toolpath over here. And what I can do is now double click or right click and edit toolpath. And then I can go back and figure out my other settings that I want. So the first tab is your geometry tab. So this is already automatically set to the size of my stock. So that orange line is the size of my stock. So the size of that foam piece. So I don't have to do anything here in that because it's pre-selected for me. So a lot of times, like, there's lots of options. A lot of times I'll just start with basically what is kind of the default settings. And then this are the heights. So this blue line is the farthest down the machine will cut. So it's the bottom height. And right now it's set to cut at the model, at the top of the model. So if you look at it from here, it's not going to cut into the model. So we're just taking away excess material. If I put here like 0.01, you can, or I'll just put in 1 just so you can see it. It will offset that from the model top. So I'm going to put in 0.1. Just leave a little bit there. All these other ones I can leave where they are. And then I have this passes tab. So passes are the actual cutting passes that it's taking. So this is right now at 0 degrees, so it's going to go straight. This is also the cool thing about Fusion, kind of, is if you just hover over something, it shows you and explains like what it is. So if you wanted to cut at a different angle, you can change the pass direction. The extension it's adding on a little bit to the outside, and the offset will add on to like the top and the bottom. So if I put in like 0.2, it'll be there. It'll go out like past on all sides. And then step over is how much that tool is going to move over with each pass. So if I have a 1/2 inch bit, this is saying go over an 1/8 of an inch. So I want to increase this to almost, I'm going to put 0.375. So that's like 3/8 of an inch. So it's almost a 1/2 an inch. And this is going to cut in both directions. So I'm just going to click OK. And it will automatically generate that toolpath. So here's the toolpath for that. And then we can simulate it right here by clicking simulate and just pressing play. And this is your speed right here. So that is okay. It's taking off enough. It's like we have our bit will be able to handle taking off that much material. But if we wanted to only take off a little bit of material at a time, we could say multiple depths until the maximum step down. You might say it's just 0.25. Click OK. And see how now it's only, I have 3 layers of passes. So it's not taking as much off. So sometimes you need to do this depending on the type of material you're using or how much you're going to cut. And then this last tab is linking and then leads and transitions. We don't need to make any adjustments to that. So I'm just going to take off. I'm going to uncheck my multiple depths because I don't need that. On yours, you might not have it set, but here I have it set to show me how long it's going to take. So this is like 2 minutes and 36 seconds. And a lot of this is like, basically you're kind of like being the slicer, you know, like how we put our thing into the slicer for the 3D printers. We're basically like making the decisions on the toolpath here. So if we, now we're going to cut around the block to cut away the excess because our block is larger. So we can come over here to our 2D contour. And it automatically has our 1/2 inch bit selected, which is fine. And I have to choose a contour. So you'll see that it'll highlight over here, but there's different types of ways of choosing the contours. So you can do like a silhouette or chaining together curves or the face contour. We just want to choose this bottom edge, and you'll see this little arrow. So if I click on that arrow and it's inside, that means it's going to cut on the inside of that line. If I click it again, I want to cut on the outside of the line. And here's where, let's say, we have a vacuum hold down. So like it's smaller than our board. So when we put our stuff down, it holds it. So we can cut all the way around without cutting into the table. But if you were cutting, say, like a circle out of a piece of plywood or something, right here there's this tabs. So if you click on that, see, it will insert tabs automatically so that you can cut a shape out on the CNC without it just getting all loose when it cuts all the way around it, because it needs to be supported. So you can put in tabs, different shaped tabs, and how close they are, you know. But we're not going to use that for ours. We're going to go to our heights again. So So our bottom height is not, we're going to use a selection, or we could use model bottom. So model bottom will set it right at that model bottom. Our passes, this is where we will want to use a multiple depths, because we don't want to just cut through like 2 inches of foam, because sometimes the bits only have like an inch of cutting, like an inch where it can actually cut. So if I click on multiple depths, I can say the maximum to go down is like a 1/2 inch. And here, I'm just telling it to go in along the wall rather than plunging down in vertically. And then here, often this will pop up where this safe distance, you just have to put in 0.2. That's like how far above the model certain moves, like when it's not cutting. It's just telling it to be at least that much above the model. And then we're going to add a ramp to ours. So the ramp will let the tool go in diagonally and slowly rather than just going down and around. So we can go, I usually use like 5 degrees. And I'll just click OK. So if you come up here and actually turn your model off and then simulate it, what it's going to show you is exactly what you're going to get. And if you just highlight the top setup here and then do the simulation, it will simulate both toolpaths. And you can see the different toolpaths by this color differentiation. So that looks good. So let's say I were to change this tool to the shorter one. Oops. And then I simulate this again. And so see how that red comes up? That's because this holder, it's telling you that holder is actually plowing into the material. So we don't want that. Doesn't cut very well. And anytime you see these red things, that means there's like a collision happening. So that's why I'll set up some tools in that's why I make alterations to the tools that are just the generic tools in the library. Turn my model back on. All right. So now we have to just do that surface. So we can go to our 3D toolpaths here and look around. And the one I'm going to use, a lot of times, depending on the surface, like if you have things with square edges, you would have to use a square edge tool, like the flatten mill. Since this is all organic surface, I'm going to use a ball end mill and use the Scallop toolpath. So I'm going to select a ball end mill. And I'm going to use a 1/4 inch ball end mill. And we have 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, and I do have 1/8 inch, but it does just take a long time. Oops, I selected that wrong one. So if I go next to my geometry tab, I can choose like the surface I want just by going down here to the where the model says, and it says model surfaces. I can select just that one surface. And then also in this, it gives me the option to avoid surfaces. So I don't want to cut the sides because they just need to be flat. So I'll say avoid those. So I'll just individually select these. Four surfaces, and then sometimes by accident you might click the whole thing and you'll select the whole body. You can just also deselect that. Oops. Maybe. So then my heights, I don't need to go all the way to the bottom, but it will be okay because I've told it not to cut on the sides, so I'll just leave those where they are. This is the step over, so this is how much it goes. So this is basically like, you can think of it like resolution. The more you have, the faster it is. But so if I put in 0.1, whoops, 0.1, and I'll click OK. And then it will calculate. It's a complex surface, so it takes a bit of time. Come on, Cloud. Who does anyone have some pieces ready that they're gonna? You have one, right? We can try that one. You want? Or maybe we'll have enough. There it goes. Usually it doesn't take this long, but I would say generally it takes me like an hour to cam parts, depending on how complicated they are, to get kind of the toolpath that I want. So you can see here, this has a very large step over. If you imagine that our bit is 0.25 and it's going over 0.1. So if I simulate this and I turn the model off, so it's just simulating the stock, I'm going to actually simulate it from the beginning. And if you click on this, it'll just go to the end of the toolpath, and then this blue line down right at the bottom will show you it's down at the bottom. It's just calculating. So this is where you kind of have to make a choice about how much machining time compared to the surface. And you can change here the material. You know, you just have some different options over here. So also there's a colorization. So if you go to you can essentially see how close it is to your actual model. So that can be good if you are making parts. Come on. I crashed my thing. So if you see this pop up, you can recover your document from your computer because it should have a cached document in memory. So maybe I'll save this. And this just means toolpath's out of date, so I can generate that, which is Control G to generate. So that will take a little while again. There are people that make quite a bit of money just making signs, low relief, like wooden plaques and signs and stuff. I mean, they do marble, like marble sculptures and everything. Like, oh, I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah, actually, I saw a Dollar General like that in one town too. A Dollar General. They didn't have the yellow sign. How's it going, Veronica?